I can't hear you. Are you purposely muted, or is it my computer being stupid?
Yeah, I also can't hear you.
Now can you?
Yes.
Okay, there's a little button pushed. For some reason, the camera was muted. I think it's because it was in my bag and maybe something fell on it, but thank you for telling me. We definitely want you to be able to hear, and the recording won't work without the button. Nick, is Nick here? Oh, hey, Nick. Daniel, I think, is watching from home. Anna is up here. Okay, I see Anna. Nathan or Nathaniel? No, Nathan. Okay. Nathan Gifford.
Here.
Okay. And then Nathaniel Gladden. Okay. Morgan, I believe, is up here. Yes. Kara. Okay. Austin Lewis. Taylor Matthews. Colin McCarty, I believe, logged in. Yes, I said Colin. JoJo is logged in. Dylan.
I'm here.
Hey, Dylan. Nairobi. She logged in last time. She might still be. Alex Rotter. Alec Thurp. Alex Thomas. Tanner Voss. Sierra Williams. Here. Riley Wyatt. And Taylor Trotter. Michael Oldani, I see you up there. Did you register recently for the class? Because I don't have him on the roster. I'm gonna write down, check into it. What? Okay, I don't think he was supposed to be in this class, but I think people still were up registered till late last week, so maybe. Okay, anybody in the room I didn't call your name? Anybody at home I didn't call your name? I think I got everybody at home. Colin, JoJo, Natalie, Morgan, and Anna. Okay.
Anna.
Anna? Okay, thank you, Anna. I'll try to say it right next time. Well, today we have to get through chapter 2. I've enjoyed chapter 2, talking about sort of the history of media technology. And we got up to really the satellite portion of the chapter, so up to like section 2.5. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to be able to finish it for Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry, for Thursday. This semester I've had more trouble keeping track of what day it is. And I'm just wearing a mask. I don't know why that's affecting my brain, but it is. So for Thursday, I want you to go ahead and read chapter 3. And we'll talk about chapter 3 on Thursday. Before I launch into the PowerPoints, I do have just a brief video that's, well, it's 9 minutes long, so it may feel like really long to you because that's a long video. But it's on the history of Sputnik, which is the first man-made satellite that went up in the orbit. And your book at this section starts with Sputnik. A little background, in the 1950s, we really had two world superpowers. We had America and we had the Soviet Union. And the Russians firmly believed in communism. We firmly believed in democracy. And these two world powers sought to really take over the rest of the world. Now, in America's case, we sought to convince people that democracy was good. We weren't trying to conquer everybody, but we were trying to persuade people. Russia was trying to conquer everybody. And one of the ways that they thought that they could win this war for the world was via space. And in the 1957, Russia beats America into launching the first man-made satellite, Sputnik. And from that day to the day, it really changed the course of human history. And we care about it because it changed mass media history as well. So I'm going to play that clip and then I'll pull up the PowerPoints. Okay, it's supposed to have sound. Let me go check it here. Sometimes people turn the sound down. I'm gonna go ahead and play it so I know when the sound comes up, and then I'll go back and back it up. Well, that says sounds at 100%. Okay, I don't know why there's no volume. There's volume on this, the keyboard. I don't know. I apologize for that. Can you see the screen at home? The screen sharing work? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for that. What I may do is when I get back to my office, get the URL from YouTube and put on the Moodle page. So if you're interested, very frustrating to me. I don't know why that's not working. The video basically shows Sputnik, so you can visually see it was the main point. The Russians put Sputnik up, and America really went into a panic because we were afraid that meant that they would have an advantage over us in terms of, you know, the nuclear arms race, or in terms of just being able to attack. And so it's really hard to overestimate the impact of that. As a result of Sputnik, Eisenhower created NASA, and we put up our own satellites, and we of course ended up winning the space race because we were the first to land man on the moon. But Sputnik started this satellite technology that helped impact the mass media. And again, I'm sorry the video didn't work. But that's the wrong PowerPoints. Oh, some days are just cursed. you. I believe it's the PowerPoints for this chapter, for this class. The ones I had up were the PowerPoints for my class tomorrow. Okay, can you guys at home see the new PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So we've already talked about this part. And here we go. So the early history of satellites is it kind of started out as a military thing. Matter of fact, people were very concerned that America was behind in satellite technology, but we actually weren't. Eisenhower had initiated a secret plan to develop technology to spy on Russia, but it was classified and he didn't want people to know it. And so orbiting satellites gave us a new method of technology and communications. And while that was amazing, we also had some technology that was still connected to landlines and to cables. Who can tell me what the Z channel is? You better remember from your reading. It's okay, it's just mentioned in one brief paragraph. Cable early on was free. You literally plugged in your TV and you got cable for free. Now you didn't get a lot, you got 3 channels or so, and but it was free. In 1974, the Z channel was the first channel that charged for cable, and it had paid services, and then it went out of business in 1975. HBO came along, and you could subscribe to HBO and get special programming for a price. And that really revolutionized and changed the way people saw television. Television burst into the popular culture in America in 1948 and has evolved through the years. But now it's like one of the most expensive things you can do. There's like, with Spectrum, there's like 3 packages. You have very basic, you have medium, and then you have medium plus everything else. And it's pretty expensive. I think I have the medium package, and I think it's like $150 a month. So it's hard to believe, well, that also includes my internet bundled. But it's hard to believe that TV, once upon a time, was free. Your chapter also talks quite a bit about semiconductors and binary signals as forms of technology to get information out quicker and quicker and quicker. The internet. The internet started as part of the government. It was just a few computers at first where they dealt with science and technology, and it was something called the ARPANET. And the ARPANET over time began to use universities more and more. So it went from the government to government universities. And then finally it was like letting the genie out of a bottle. You couldn't contain it. And so the ARPANET eventually becomes the internet, and the whole world is connected. Your book talks about a guy named Ed Berners-Lee. What did Ed Berners-Lee do? Anybody know? That's okay, you probably read this well over a week ago because you were supposed to read it for last Tuesday. He's sort of the guy credited with creating the World Wide Web and the idea of connectedness within the internet. In the 1990s, 2000-ish, we began talking about media convergence. And what that meant was most mass media were print or TV or radio. You had kind of distinct silos. When I went to school, I got a degree in magazine, and you got newspaper, advertising. But today, most programs kind of have what they call convergence, where you study, like in our program, you study writing across platforms. You take media elements with Dr. Kate, which teaches you all kinds of different applications. And so digital technology has arisen, and it hasn't replaced all the other technologies, but it has made everything faster and better. And so one of the things that you want to do is learn an array of technologies that you can write across platforms. And so the digital world has what the book called technologicalizing, I can't say the word, the written word. It also talks about democratizing it. Has the World Wide Web and the internet democratized the written word? And what in the world does that even mean? What do you guys think? I need a break from talking in my mask, so I want us to talk a little bit, get you guys, you're with me, I can see it in your faces, but have we democratized the written word? And if so, what does that even mean?
I think we have, and like, if we had talked about how, we talked about like social media and dealing with other news sources and stuff like that, it's become more decentralized with a lot of the stuff. So I think we have kind of, people are kind of free to do however much they want with what the written word is out there, you know.
Okay. Who else wants to weigh in on that question? Have we made, in the way that Gutenberg's printing press democratized the written word, has the internet done that too? And is it a good thing what the internet has done and the World Wide Web has done? What do you think? Yeah.
I think that like the internet is like a really good thing, and it's really able to share with a lot more ideas. And I don't think it like democratized everything. It just added like a whole other element on top of being able to share more regularly.
Okay. So in a sense, it's broadened the marketplace of ideas. There's more and more ideas out there. And you still get to decide if you accept them, just like the market days of old, the marketplace of ideas of old. There's more out there. Might be easier to be manipulated because some of the people putting stuff out there are pretty sophisticated at it. It has sort of made, it's definitely connected the world in a way we've never been connected before until it doesn't. There's still people out there who are victims of the digital divide, people who can't afford a computer. And then if they happen to have a computer, who can't afford the internet. So there's still some people in some areas of the world who can't participate, but the marketplace of ideas is global in a way it's never been before. And I have to think that's more good than bad. Because I'm a big believer in letting everybody share their ideas, whether or not I agree with them. The book talks a little bit about media architecture. And I thought, that's kind of an interesting term. I hadn't really thought about the architecture of media. Gorilla Glass is an invention that was created by Corning, which is a glassware company. And what they did is they created sort of a thin piece of glass that's virtually unbreakable. And they invented this thing. It was kind of fascinating. And then they kind of realized they didn't have a use for it, so it kind of got shelved for a while. Steve Jobs, when he was working on one of his inventions, I think it was maybe his iPhone, he asked Corning if they had any kind of special glass and described it. And they said, by the way, we do. And so then they were able to bring that invention back out and use it in a lot of technology. And that glass is called Gorilla Glass because of its strength, of its near unbreakability. So there's some discussion in there about architecture in that vein. Glass is being used in some of the digital areas, and so I don't know that that's the super most important part of the chapter, but it's interesting. Internet delivered communication, there's really two forms. You've got your interpersonal. Interpersonal is usually one-on-one, but I think given social media and the internet, you can do one-on-one communication. And in mass communication, you can put something out that goes to the masses and goes viral. So the internet has a lot of interesting aspects to it. Okay. One of the things that happened, particularly around the advent of radio and its impact on the world and then television, is scholars have tried to develop different theories and models for how we can explain the impact and the effects of the media. I don't know if you remember, but I think the first week we were here, I talked a little bit about the hypodermic needle theory. One of the early theories about the impact of the media was that just like medicine in a needle, if you watch television, it's like taking a shot and you're going to be infected by whatever it is you watch. So if I watch, I don't know, wrestling, I'm going to become violent because I'm watching violence. That theory has since been utterly, disavowed. That theory doesn't hold water. Some people over time might watch violence and become violent, but many people don't. And so there are other factors involved. And so the hypodermic needle theory doesn't work, isn't right. There was a guy named Laswell who came up with a model for understanding mass communication. And it's kind of simplistic, but kind of interesting. He basically says, understanding the media is this easy. Who says what, over what channel, to whom, and to what effect? Okay? So who's sending the message makes a difference. Whom, over what channel? Is it television, internet? Is it advertising? Is it newspaper? So what channel they use will impact things. There was a scholar named Marshall McLuhan who once said, the medium is the message. So the medium you pick for your message makes a difference. So who says what, over what channel, to whom? So the audience matters. I would hopefully send a message to you that's different than a message I might send to your parents in terms of how it's framed, may have the same essential message because you're a different age group, different group of people. And then to what effect? How does it affect folks? Okay, it's kind of like the basic sender, message, channel, receiver, but it's kind of a slight play on that. Laswell's models probably got quite a bit of merit, but you still have to figure out the effect of what happens. Trying to think of something where people actually went out and did what they were told. Can anybody think of an example of a message in the popular culture that went out over a channel and then people went out and did something as a result? Sometimes voting messages do that. If there's a particular campaign, it's like, we're not telling you who to vote for, but just go out and vote. But I don't know. I think a lot of times people ignore those.
I think the book in the first chapter had the example of 2012.
Yeah,
Now, it wasn't necessarily a whole bunch of people went out, because actually less people went out than they thought. But still a lot of people went out
yeah.
for that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. But that's kind of Laszlo's model. Now, there are limitations to it. And so one thing to keep in mind when you study models of theories about the media is that none of them 100% explain everything about the media. So models in and of themselves are just an attempt to get an understanding, because communication, well, it sounds simple, sender, message, channel, receiver, doesn't get much simpler than that. It actually is more complicated. So these models are just an attempt at explaining things. The next slide talks about the concentric circle model of communication. And it talks about these things here: the medium, or what we would call the channel; amplification, how you amplify your message; message controls, impediments that are in process; and then one to decipher. I'm going to go ahead and turn it to that picture. So this is a concentric circle model. Again, a theory for how to understand the media that's imperfect, but it can be helpful. So here is the contents. And so this is kind of like the message. You have different components that affect the contents. You have feedback. You have media amplification. You have the communicators. The codes are how you communicate. You know, whatever word selection you make for a particular audience can be a code. I would pick different words depending upon who the audience is. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was visiting my sister, and her daughter was about 3, but very bright kid, maybe 4. We were out having dinner, my sister, her husband, and her oldest child. And they brought us our drinks. We were at a Mexican restaurant, and I had a Diet Coke. I was the only one at the table, so I had a straw in my drink. And Katie said, "Aunt Pam, why do you have a straw?" Or I had 2 straws, maybe that's what it was. And I said, "Katie, because they want to differentiate between the Coke and the Diet Coke." And my brother-in-law starts laughing. He's like, what did I say? And he said, "Did you just say differentiate to a 3-year-old? So the code is, she actually got what I was saying, but his point was valid. I should have probably said something like, so they could tell the difference. So your code is how you pick certain words that are good for a particular audience. You all know what differentiate means, but probably most 3-year-olds don't. Gatekeepers, those are the people who sometimes get to control what media gets out and what doesn't. If you're a reporter or an editor at a newspaper or a broadcast station, you're literally a gatekeeper, because you decide what news is put on every day. The media itself, regulators, that's the government. The government really can't regulate print media too much, but they do regulate broadcast media. You have to have a license to own a TV station. And so regulators can affect the messages that get out. There are different filters. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Audiences and effects. You know, I'm just going to say this. I'm including you folks at home as well. I think this is a really good audience. You guys, you know, not that you live and breathe MC 101, but when you're here, you're paying attention, you seem interested, you participate. And so this would be a pretty friendly audience in order to at least talk about this class. But there are some audiences you can have that might be hostile to whatever message you have. They don't want to be there. They think you're full of baloney. And so the audience that you're sending the message to also impacts the way that you send your message. and then to what effect. All of these things go into the communication process, which is why communication is done so poorly so often. I always kind of ponder how ironic it is that communications is probably the most important thing mankind does, and we're so bad at it so much of the time, whether it's interpersonally or mass communication. What's noise? So you've got your media distortion and noise. So I'm trying to communicate to you what might be noise to keep things from happening. Yeah.
Like people talking.
Okay, sometimes it is literal physical noise. And so things like, as we're talking, if somebody was jackhammering or they were doing some kind of pounding nearby, the fact the internet didn't work just right when I tried it, that's a form of noise, kept me from showing you something I wanted to. That's kind of called channel noise. So it's kind of when your channel gets messed up. But you can overcome it. I'll just put this little video on the Moodle page, and if you want to watch it, you can. But there's other kind of noise. Channel noise is the easiest to overcome. You know, your computer goes down, you reboot it. You can overcome that. There's other kinds of noise, and they're known as selective perception, selective exposure, and selective retention. Selective perception means I basically perceive what I want to. And you may or may not know that you're doing it. But you're predisposed to see the world in a certain way, and that predisposition affects how you hear a message. And I'll give you an example. I always hesitate because it makes it sound like my mother and I didn't get along, and nothing could be further from the truth. But my parents and I have completely divergent political views, night and day. And it's not a form of rebellion. We see the world the same way. We just see politically different ways to solve the problems. And I'm okay with the fact they don't believe like me, but it's been less so now, but it was distressing to my mom and my dad that I thought differently. So keep in mind that they believe that we never can agree on anything, which I don't think that's true. You can disagree, but on everything. So one Thanksgiving I was home, and I have a pretty big family. We're sitting around the table. We were passing the food. And I honestly don't remember the example, and I probably wouldn't share it here because I try not to tip my hand what I think politically. I don't want you to think I don't agree with you or something. So I try to just stay politically neutral as much as I can. But the family was talking about something that had just happened in the news involving a politician. And my mom was kind of going off. She got really passionate about politics. And when she was done, I said, you know, Mom, I could not agree with you more strongly. I completely 100% agree with you. And she kind of slammed her milk down and, you know, said, can someone pass the gravy? And she said, what happened to you? Now keep in mind, she loves me. She was talking politically. And a little bit later, I was talking to my dad and I said, what do you think that was about? I said, I agreed with her. And he said, honey, she's just not used to that. So in other words, she didn't hear me say that I agreed with her because she's predisposed selectively perceiving what it is I said. And we all do that all the time and don't even know it. And I'm unaware of it, but I'm sure I did that to my mother on other occasions. So selective perception, noise, gets in the way of the communication process. And if you amplify it over mass media, even more. And that happens a lot. You're predisposed to think, I dislike this politician, that politician, so you don't even hear what they actually say. So that's a form of noise. Another form of noise is selective exposure. You only watch the things you already agree with. if I do nothing else in this class, I challenge you to listen to all points of view, even the ones you think are baloney. Because it will, if nothing else, strengthen your own point of view if you listen to others. So if you're a person who only watches Fox News, you guys may not listen to any of this stuff, because I challenge you from time to time to watch MSNBC. If you only watch MSNBC, I challenge you from time to time to watch Fox News. I think you should get exposed to a variety of ideas, and then the ideas that you have are even stronger because you've considered other points of view. So sometimes the communication process gets mixed up because people are very selective in what they see, so your message doesn't get there. And then finally, selective retention. And again, we're all guilty of this. That means I only remember that which I want to. And boy, that can mess up the communication process. So for example, let's say one of you comes up and says to me, Dr. Perry, I don't believe in final exams. So I'm just not going to take the final exam. And you can't make me because it's against my personal belief system. I don't know how I would actually respond to that, but I might say something like, that is a choice that you can make. You can choose not to take the final exam. But if you do, you will get a 0, and the 0 will dramatically affect your grade. But it is a choice that you can make. And then the person who said that leaves and tells their roommate, hey, Dr. Pierce says I don't have to take the final. That's selective retention. And we do that a lot too. So noise is one of the things that really affects the communication process. And so that's a part of this model. But you can see there's a lot of factors going on here, from government regulation to gatekeepers to, different audiences, the way you code what you say, basically selection of the message and the words, to noise. So this concentric circle model has a lot going on, but probably represents the complexity of it more than Laswell's. Laswell's model actually is in here, but this has more layers to it. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but what's gatekeeping? Who can tell me what gatekeeping is in relationship to the mass media? And who is a gatekeeper?
Gatekeeper would be like a department head or company putting out the message and decides whether it's appropriate to put out or recommend.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of David Brinkley. He was a longtime ABC, I believe he was ABC newsman, who is, I'm pretty sure he's dead now, but somebody one time asked him, what is news? And he said, news is what I say it is. I thought, that's pretty arrogant. News is what I say it is, because he was a newsman. But that's true in so many levels. Even with the internet, you don't have endless resources, endless room. And so the Southeast Missouri newspaper, when it comes out, it represents what the editors think should be in there. And there are stories that don't get in. And I'm not saying this in relation to the Missourian, but it's the news that we don't get that is more biased than the news we get. So in other words, if I'm not interested in certain stories and I just leave them out and you never know about them, that's far more impactful than the ones that I put in and have my personal bias in them. So gatekeeping is a very serious function in society. Now with the internet, different opposing point of views can get out. And so gatekeeping is not as dramatic as it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s and 90s, but it's still there. And some media are regulated. Why is the broadcast media regulated and most print media really aren't? Doesn't the First Amendment say Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or protecting or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press? Okay, government should make no law, but yet they regulate the broadcast industry. Why is it different than the print industry? Yes.
It's instantaneous. So, I guess an example of it, I think back in like, Idaho or somewhere, there was a live broadcast of somebody being murdered. And so, when you're printing a newspaper, it takes time to make that. People think very well of what they're going to say and how it's going to be received. Meanwhile, broadcast is instant, most of it's live. So, it's kind of, on the spot thinking.
Yeah, there is a more dramatic impact because of it's in real time. There's also the fact that the frequencies on which broadcast happens are limited. So they have to kind of dole out who can have a license and who can't. So as a TV station, you have to get licenses from the government. It's more powerful in certain ways. And so there are more rules and regulations that govern TV. So to sort of summarize the whole chapter, we talked a lot about media technology, going back to Gutenberg and forward, printing technology, chemical technology impacted really the photographic arena. Photographs were created when light hit the certain chemicals and would make images on paper. And so chemicals really had a lot to do with the development of photography. Electrical technology had to do with radio and TV. And then these other technologies we talked about today. So media technology has influenced media content and media impact and really had an influence on various audiences. Do you guys have any questions out of chapter 1? We're not leaving yet, but I do want to conclude this, and we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about some issues related to books, because your Moodle assignment to read had a lot to do about the book industry, and we've touched on it with Gutenberg. But any last questions about chapter 2 before we kind of move on? Okay, let's talk just a few minutes about the book industry. How many of you want to be an author someday? There's always people who want to be an author. Anybody? That's unusual, but that's okay. I've always wanted to be an author, and I eventually became one. And I remember when I was in school, I asked one of my teachers, she was kind of famous because she had been a reporter who covered presidential politics, and then she went into writing, and she essentially left teaching, and all she does is write for a living. She writes for, I believe, Random House, and she's a best-selling author. And I asked her one day in class, I said, okay, you're sort of famous, so I'm assuming it was easy for you to get a book deal, which I shouldn't have assumed that. How does somebody like me, who's not known, get a book deal? And she said, there are indeed some people with a reputation. You know, Stephen King wants to write a book, you know, they're going to publish him. But she said most books, or most new authors, it's the idea of the book that carries the day, not who you are. And so she said to me, she said, if you have a good idea for a book and you can prove that there's not one in the market, then you can get a book deal. Now, may not be with Random House, but you can. And I found that to be true. Not always easy to get one, but there is a market out there. And so that's kind of encouraging to me, that the idea of the book is what carries the day. She's written several books now, I don't know, something like 6. And she wrote one book, I think it was the second book that she wrote, called Freedom's Daughters. And what she did one day, she went to the library and she wanted to check out a book about women's contributions to the civil rights movement, right? Because when people talk about the civil rights movement in the beginning, they talk about Martin Luther King Jr., and appropriately so, and they talk about Jesse Jackson and different people who were part of the movement. John, who's a congressman who just died? John Lewis. But they don't talk about the women. And there are a lot of women who were active and behind the civil rights movement. And when she couldn't find the book that she wanted to read, she decided to write it. And it's called Freedom's Daughters, and it's a beautiful book. To make my other point, and then we'll kind of move on, since there aren't too many would-be authors, maybe there's some at home. My sister, who is a public school teacher, and very smart and, you know, very educated, came up with a book idea from her personal experience. And I have to admit, I wasn't sure she would get a book deal, but she did. She has 3 children, and when she gave birth to her 3rd child, she got serious postpartum depression. And it was quite severe. So one day she went to a Christian bookstore, because she's a Christian, and she was trying to find a book about postpartum depression from a Christian perspective. She didn't want one from a doctor. She didn't want one from a psychiatrist. She wanted one from a mom who had gone through postpartum depression and was from a Christian mom's perspective. One wasn't, it didn't exist. That's kind of shocking to me. So the bookstore lady said, you should write one. And she probably didn't mean it. But my sister, most tenacious person I've ever known, went home, wrote a book, published it, and spent a year on a speaking circuit talking to moms about how you get over postpartum depression. And so literally someday, if you have an idea for a book, if there's one out there, you can probably get a pretty good idea, pretty good opportunity. Today, too, there's something called self-publishing. So there's a lot of publishers out there. There's one in Nashville called Cold Tree Press, and you can self-publish your own book. So if you can't get a publisher to do your book, you can put one together, go to Cold Tree, and you pay them, and they print it for you, and it looks just like a book that came from, you know, a real publisher. They are a real publisher, but you literally pay to have your book come out. So there's lots of different ways to do that. The book industry also has changed a lot at the college level. The fact you guys get to rent your books is pretty amazing to me. Hopefully you guys appreciate that and you're able to take advantage of that. Probably still very expensive. We used to have to always buy all our books. And maybe you still do for some classes. What do you think are some of the most impactful books that have come out during your lifetime? A book that made an impact on culture or society since you've been alive? And I guess if you want to look at historical, what books you think have had the most impact on people? Let me start here, and I don't mean this disparagingly because you're educated people who read a lot. Do you guys read a lot of books, though? Okay, I see some heads nodding. Okay. What do you read? What do you enjoy reading? Besides MC 101 textbook, what do you enjoy reading?
Realistic fiction.
What kind of fiction?
Realistic.
Realistic fiction? I like true crime. So I think part of me wanted to be a detective because I like solving puzzles, but I think I was probably afraid of the whole you have to carry a sidearm thing. So I never thought seriously about doing it. But I would, I'm very interested in detective work. I guess that's why I like being a reporter. It's like solving a puzzle a lot of times. Okay, what books are most impactful? Just yell some out. Okay, religious literature, right, has changed the world. The Bible, the Quran, yeah. Yes. Are you just stretching?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just running you got it. Apologize.
What books of literature have changed the world? Yeah.
1989.
Okay, George Orwell's book. Uncle Tom's Cabin was an impetus to help start the Civil War. I don't know, you get the idea. Books and ideas have really kind of changed the whole world. I'll be honest with you, I had planned to show that video, and I had a second video I was going to show. And so I think we just declare that we're done, and I'll come clean your seats. But does anybody have a question? Read chapter 3 for Thursday. And make sure that you've got your first 3 forms should have been done by Friday. Form 4, you have till midnight tonight. And so make sure you're staying up with the forums. Okay, I will be there in just a second. Let me turn off the recording.